Hi, everyone, and welcome to another week's episode on Circling the Rabbit Hole podcast, a safe space where we endeavor to have conversations around more sensitive topics, especially so to do with sexual, reproductive, and related mental health. This week on the podcast, we're going to be discussing something that's pretty sensitive, and I'd like to start off by issuing a trigger warning around violence of many forms. It's unfortunate that we have gotten to this place, but as we've seen in Kenya today, we are struggling with an issue around sexual, gender, and other forms of violence, as well as femicide. We've gotten to a place where, honestly, it's difficult not to feel emotional about the topic. It's difficult not to feel anger and also not to understand what's going on, especially so as a female, because we are worst affected. Today, we're going to be discussing GBV and femicide from a male perspective, as I grapple to try and understand why we are where we are. And I want to bring you along for the conversation so that we sort of hear a male take on the topic. And I think I found exactly the right person for this conversation, Rix Poet, who is joining me today to have... I'm going to be emotional, I think. It's one of those conversations where it's difficult to take it lightly or look at it in a way that's without the weight that it requires. But we are in a very sad state in the country. We are struggling with violence against women that doesn't make any sense. And I'm sure because you are an advocate, you have these conversations on the ground level on a daily basis. More than anyone else, you understand where we are and maybe hopefully a little bit about how we got here. So before I keep ranting and go on forever, maybe we can start off with you introducing yourself.
Yeah.
As always, I ask for a shameless plug. So plug your social media handles as well, or where we can find you.
Okay.
And especially because you also have a podcast. So I'd want you to talk about that as well.
Let me start with the podcast.
Okay.
I run a podcast called Nothing Underneath.
Mm-hmm.
It's a space where we tell the sex stories of everyday Africans.
Okay.
Yeah. Not just celebrities. Like
Right.
everybody who's having sex or not having sex
Right.
can come and share their story.
Mm-hmm.
I am very passionate about sex in all its forms and its politics as
Right.
well.
Right.
I am a poet. I write and perform poetry, especially around social justice and erotica.
Okay.
Apart from that, I tell stories in helping to challenge the harmful norms of heteromasculinity. So that's masculinity in the form in which most of us are used to knowing it as.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm really just a happy dude who's happy to be alive.
So for your personal page, maybe you can give us that, the handle?
Yes. Instagram is Rix Poet, RIXPOET, the same for TikTok, and Onyango Otieno on Facebook.
Okay.
Yes.
And for the podcast?
Nothing Underneath podcast everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes, thanks.
So like I said, you're probably one of the best voices on this conversation because I know you've also, just along your journey, and we'll talk a bit more about it, received a lot of pushback, a lot of hate, negativity, because you are what we would consider sex positive, and sex in itself is a taboo conversation in general. We sort of have a culture where we would rather not talk about something that everyone is either doing or not doing. It's a normal part of life. Yeah. And yet, with previous conversations I've had on the podcast, we refuse to talk about just the basics of how to name body parts. Yes. So how are we going to even have conversations around sex? So let's start historically. Were you always someone who considered themselves sex positive? Did you grow up with male influence of any kind that drove you in that direction? Yeah. Was it straightforward? Was it a straightforward path for you?
Yeah. Interesting. Nobody has ever asked me that question, actually.
I endeavor.
Well, it wasn't straightforward, but I would think poetry was the window for me. Writing, I used to write a lot of love poems when I was been a hopeless romantic for some time.
Right, okay. A dying breed, sadly.
Yeah, well. And the funny bit about it is, my consciousness of sex goes back to when I was 12. The first time I had wet dreams, class 6, and they're teaching us about this thing, but then there's no much detail. I just remember one day waking up in the middle of the night, and I thought I wanted to pee, but then the thing that came out was thick, and it felt good, and I was like, what is this thing? I want to experience it again, But then it took a bit of a while, maybe until when I was 20. And I've been vocal about this thing. My first ever physical, sexual experience with another human being was abuse.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because before that, I was just pleasuring myself, and I didn't even know that thing had a name, right? So after the abuse happened, and it happened in the hands of a house manager,
right?
I think something changed, right? Because at the time I was studying in Uganda, I was doing my A level.
Okay.
So I moved from home and I went back to school. And it was a serious situation because it actually gave me like an STI kind of thing.
Okay.
So I had to treat myself using my pocket money,
which was
a lot of money.
It was going to be my next question. Did you have anyone you could talk to about
there
this?
There was nobody. It was so
Nothing.
chaotic. And you see now, because I was in an SDS school, Claire, okay?
Ooh, okay.
That tells you.
Okay.
So this thing really ate me up until, and you know the way us guys are, like umenyamazia kitu when you're dying, you know? So it got to a point I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. So I opened up to my deskmate, who happened to be, it was a mixed school as well. So it was like, my deskmate was the head girl of the school.
Okay.
And Jean was really good people. So I told Jean, yo, man, at the time, I thought that is actually sex that happened. It's like 10 years later that I realized I had actually been abused.
Yeah.
So I said, oh man, me I had sex these holidays, and it was unprotected, and this happened to me, and I'm actually suffering. And she gave me the courage to go to the dispensary to get myself treated.
Yeah.
I didn't even tell my friends who we were sleeping with in the same dorm.
Right.
Nobody else in that school knew what was going on with me. Yeah. Shame.
Of course.
Like you're scared, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
This is just my first time. True. Am I going to die?
True. Yeah. Is it supposed to be like this?
Yeah, there was nobody even ever told me how sex feels like. Before that. We were just using porn. And then those years, we didn't have these smartphones unafungua XXX videos na ushafika. We had polyphonic phones. Yeah. The ones where you open the Google screen and you have to wait for this thing to come.
It loads pixelated
exactly. We were really patient even through the seasons.
Yeah.
So the next day I went to the doctor and it was a really chill male practitioner that I got there who was very kind with me.
Okay, that's good.
And he looked at my manhood and made some tests and he told me to come the next day for the results. It was like the longest 24 hours of my life. And then I went and I remember going back to his office, and he had like a Fanta sat on the table. And I was like, this is it. Nimeisha mimi mambo yangu imeisha. Yeah, like I knew, because this is like psychologically it was like, he plans to talk to me, prepare the space and all that.
Yeah.
And then he's actually the only man ever in my life who ever gave me some kind of sex education.
Okay.
Because he told me, this is what happened to you. You got some kind of fungi. When you want to have sex, especially with people you don't know, try use protection.
Right. Yeah.
And that was it.
Okay.
That was it.
That was the extent of your sex ed.
So I just remember, after being educated a little bit, now I said, okay, now it's time to explore.
Right.
So I'd go to Kampala, and now I said, let me see what this city has for me. And I would pay for sex
Okay.
in Kampala.
Right.
They have a very happy street over there where you can go and choose what you like and enjoy yourself. And I remember, actually, after that was like kind of like my beginning, of the sex thing and everything. And there wasn't too much thought about it.
Right.
I was just enjoying myself, exploring. But then when I began therapy, so that was 2009. So I began therapy in 2017, some good years later,
Right,
after
okay.
falling to depression and everything.
Yeah.
And now, of course, you're going to a therapist and they're asking you about your history,
Yeah,
how did you grow up, blah, blah, blah. And I go back and, we talk about this space where the abuse happened and the time I start going out. And we talk about it for a little bit. And we think, okay, maybe you became a little hypersexual as a response to what happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we had to deal with that. All right. And that was one part of it. The other part was I actually learned that I enjoy sex. I love sex. I love fun and I love pleasure in responsible ways, of course.
Yeah.
You see.
Yeah.
And all these things came together with my own internal revolutions of questioning religion, questioning my masculinity, questioning my identity in the class that I was brought up in, questioning politics, questioning everything that's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And so, in as much as in some circles, I may be known so much to be vocal about sex, I am also really vocal about many other important things to me, like social justice, like this masculinity thing that we are really, handling each other around about, and when I also look back at my family, which is part of the trauma work, my dad came from a polygamous home.
Okay.
And there were many kids. Like grandpa gave birth to like 30 kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was 3 wives.
Okay.
A lot was going on there. It was a big village. It was a city, that place, And in my village, because it was a big village, they used to have this music hangouts,
Yeah.
So people would converge there to dance.
Nice. Okay.
Right? Like at night, they have these bigger speakers and people come in. But then there was also a lot of sex that was going on.
Right. At the same gathering.
Yes, like with my uncles and whatever. And people even were just teenagers, you see. And you see, we were kids. And I mean, you see what's going on.
Yeah,
you just don't know there's a language to it. But all that. And I realized that, my people were very sexual. They were very sexual. And sex was actually part and parcel of culture. It wasn't something outside of it. Like people joked about sex. They had it a lot. And even going further back, even in the Luo community, sex was also used for different rituals.
Right. Okay.
Different kind of rituals, which your today Luo person may not even be aware of.
Right.
Yeah, whether we were harvesting, whether we were celebrating something at home, sex was part of joy.
Of the culture.
It was part of the thing.
Right.
So those things helped me deal with the shame,
Okay.
especially that I had to deal with from religion, and brought up a Catholic, being an SDA, being a Presbyterian. There was so much shame attached to sex. And when I was coming to myself, I realized, okay, there's a part of me that had trauma about this thing, but this is not going to be my defining identity around sex. Like I dealt with it. It happened. I've been open about it. And then there is this part where pleasure, sexual pleasure, as part of my own liberation process, as part of me enjoying my own life, it also existing.
Yeah.
And it's now, as an artist, as a creative, looking at my environment, my society, my culture, and seeing that we are actually having a lot of problems here. Actually, on both sides, the violent side of sex and the pleasure side of sex,
Right. Yeah.
Again, because of the shame we carry about this thing. When it happens to us violently, it's shut down, it's put under the carpets, and you can't talk about it.
True.
And then this one, you're having it, but in hiding, you know?
Yeah.
And I know two or three things about hiding, because that's how I was brought up at home.
Right, yeah.
You know, you can't speak, you can't talk. And my dad was really violent towards us and myself and my mom and everybody else at home. So being an artist, I like coming out and talking about these things that my environment is struggling to speak about, you know?
Yeah.
And sex happens to be one of them.
One of them, yeah. You mentioned your dad being violent. So again, we're talking about gender-based violence and femicide specifically. For the average man in Kenya, growing up in households that are violent, especially where the male figure, father figure, is a violent person, how much influence do you think that has with what we are seeing now? Because, again, I'm just one of those people trying to understand how we got to such a bad situation. What do you think that imprinted, for example, that since you lived through that experience, what do you think the imprinting was in terms of what masculinity is and how you handle females in your life?
Oh man, like I witnessed men in my upbringing being vehemently violent towards children and towards women.
Right.
From such a young age, it was so clear where a woman belonged. It was so clear.
Right, okay.
It was so clear, like you were not fumbling that, you know? Just by the way my uncles, especially from my dad's side, my mom's side, things were really chill. My dad's side, there was so much chaos, and grandpa was just a crazy dude, man. And the way he treated his wives, the way he treated his children, and then the way he treated his male kids from his daughters was also different.
Right, okay.
There's a story, because my mom was married by 19. So they'd go to that village and see what's going on. And she told me a story one time where grandpa would call his male kids to his house, because he had his own house in the village. And he would give his male kids like soup and nyama and these nice things. And the girls would just eat mboga with their mothers.
Really?
My friends.
I mean, what did we do not to deserve meat?
And it's right there. It's right there. Like,
so it's already clear.
What would this boy grow up thinking about his sisters?
Of course,
and generally the women around him. If his father mistreats the wives, their mothers, and it is over and over and over again. It's so clear, because the patriarch of the home is the source of power, the authority and everything. And kuzidisha in our culture, or not even, this wasn't formerly our culture, but now in the religions that we have now, God also takes the shape of a man.
True.
Now these things are together, right? The symbol of a man, the symbol of power and authority on earth takes the shape of a man. And the symbol of authority and power in heaven takes the shape of a man.
And I don't know who decided that.
Exactly. You have no chance as a woman, as a queer person. And also as a man who doesn't associate with that thing. You don't have a chance, right? So me seeing also what my dad was at home, I questioned a lot of that violence. It was crazy things, some of which, Claire, I have never spoken about, even in public.
That's understandable.
Yes, as vocal as I still have been. Like, kuna vitu sijai sema.
True.
You know? I speak about them maybe in conversations, I'm meeting up people and everything. And the more I talk about them, the more I realize how deeply serious things really, really, really were. And, sometimes I also do trauma coaching for people. And, people come to you with stories of experiences they thought were normal for a Kenyan household.
Right. Yeah.
Until you make them realize, fam, this was violence. This was really kina mama walikuwa tu wana fight kidogo nyumbani.
It's hard to believe that we've gotten to a place where we've normalized violence.
Yeah,
because it's so common. It's the only thing you've grown up knowing. So when you hear that men are violent, it doesn't surprise you.
Wanaume wanakuanga hivyo.
Yeah, but that's just so
and
unfortunate.
That's what my grandma would tell my mother,
Oh, wow.
Men are just like that because their husband was like that.
Of course, yeah.
And all their lives, men have been like that.
True.
You see.
And again, if you're married young, what other experience do you have?
You don't have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so interrogating these mannerisms from the men around me, like the adult men. I mean, there are a few really great, gentle uncles, I must say. But then when the violence was happening, it was so dehumanizing to the women, our aunties, my mom. It was really dehumanizing. Like, they made it known that they actually despised these people.
Right.
In the manner in which the violence was happening.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was being beaten up in public, or somebody actually breaks your hand, or, I have seen my mom like akivutwa nywele mpaka damu inatoka hapa kwa hairline, and blood all over the house. And the next day, we are showing up in that house like nothing happened, Jana.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about it. We are just rolling into the days. I'm going to school. I'm meeting up other students. Nobody's talking about what happened in their home, so I can't say. So
you can't say what happened in yours.
Umetokea tu na kriba kwa bag.
You don't have a comparison either, because if you're not talking to each other,
because
a lot of children, you learn from what someone else, the conversations you have with your friends in school.
Yes.
So if you're not talking about this issue, how do you know it's not normal?
Right. So you think it's only in your house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I took a little bit of growing up because by the time I was in my teenage years, I was rebelling, right? And because I didn't like violence, I didn't like the fact that my dad was beating me up, and he had these very angry ways of showing his displeasure.
Right. Yeah.
He would carry me and throw me to the wall. He would stomp my head with his feet. He would do crazy things. Then I started running away from home because home was too much for me. And I was a street boy a couple of times, hanging out with like sex workers on Koinange Street. And just as a 16-year-old, seeing all that mayhem happening in the streets, I shouldn't be there, But then as I'm growing up, I'm realizing, this violence wasn't just happening in my home. It's in my neighborhood.
Because now you're having more conversations with people around you.
Actually, no, I'm seeing.
Or you're just watching.
Yeah, I've been an observant child from such a young age. I'm seeing. It's on the TV.
Right.
Like even when I'm watching all these blockbuster movies, the men are still more violent. And especially to other men and to kids and to women. It was in very rare occasions did I see around me women were as violent as I saw men being.
Right.
It was like very dehumanizing. And beyond that, then I'm starting to see, there's a way we understand authority and power and violence. There's a way they're connected, Now I'm getting to around 17 years old, and I started going to protests actually as young as that.
Yeah.
I remember 2006 when the government, they got into KTN at the time at I&M because of this freedom of media speech stuff, And I went out there to protest. And as I'm there as well, I'm still seeing men as figures of power in my culture. It was these men who are coming out in rallies, speaking in protests. it was these men we were being told about on the news. I remember Kwanzaa back in the day, KBC, when news starts, it's just the face of Moi plastered over there on the screen, So men were everywhere.
Yeah.
Where power was concerned.
True. That's very true. Things are a bit different now. We've started to see more women. And again, after a lot of hard work as well.
Yes.
But that's very true. Back in the day,
exactly,
the figureheads, so
it
to
was
speak,
always men.
was always men.
And still, to a big chunk of it, it's still what is there.
Yeah.
I questioned that from such a young age. And I was like, why is this the way the world is operating? Because now I started connecting the mannerisms of my dad at home with how the whole structure of violence looked like in patriarchy.
Right.
Because they were the same thing.
Yeah.
This person doesn't want you to challenge them. They want you to be yes all the time to what they want all the time.
All the time.
You don't have space to speak.
True.
You can't be different from them.
True.
I can't handle that.
You have to conform. Or we beat you out.
Yeah,
basically.
You're beaten out. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's why we were always fighting with my dad.
Right.
Because I got to a point I just could not take it anymore.
Yeah.
But then that also, quote unquote, was some kind of a twisted gift to me. That alteration between me and my dad was kind of a gift to me because it allowed me to question every other thing in my life.
Okay.
Yeah. So the violence we are witnessing today does not exist in a vacuum.
True.
The other missing piece is high school for boys, right? In many of our boarding schools in high school, boys are brutalized. They're brutalized by older boys, they're brutalized by the administration. And these administrations that we are having in many high schools, for boys' high schools, were really just an inheritance from colonial systems of education.
True. That's true.
It's the same thing. We just changed the players, right?
Yeah.
But the thinking is very white supremacist.
We carried forward what we were taught, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You get that when you see a boy on the corner, you first think of him as a criminal, not as a human being, not as a student, not as a child who needs help, a criminal.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Now, many of us out here are living with stories we've never even shared from high school.
Okay.
When I see the chaos on social media in our relationships and in our homes, I understand it because I see where it came from.
Right.
My father learned from his father. My grandfather had been a soldier in the Second World War, fought in Burma, came back home. His head was never the same.
Right.
He probably suffered a lot of PTSD, but nobody picked it up.
I mean, what was therapy back
exactly.
then?
Not even a word in our consciousness.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Even though we did have traditional means of healing, and some of these things were what the colonialists took away from us. So we were left with nothing to deal with our pain.
Yeah.
Violence is what took up that space against one another, right? And so now it becomes intergenerational. Yeah. And now the religion is also telling you the man is the head of the home.
Yeah.
And God is a man.
And you're supposed to submit as a woman. Submit.
And as a child.
Yeah.
Do this, do that as much as he wants. All right?
Yeah.
That is already violence. The thought already is violent.
Especially so because you're teaching this in a space where violence is the norm. Yeah. If my figurehead, if the one I'm supposed to be submitting to has been taught nothing but violence, then that's the propagation. So if church says submit to your husband, but your husband is violent, you're supposed to accept that as the normal. Yeah. Which is really unfortunate.
Even the fact that the communication around submission alone, we start from there. That is violent already. Because there is nowhere on earth where when somebody starts their life, you tell them your role in your life is to submit to this other human being. Yeah. That is violent. Yeah. Just because of your identity. That is violent. It is also violent to men, but they don't see it, that they are being told you are above. There's a quote that says, whoever you pedestalize, you also put on a cross.
True. That's actually so very true.
You know?
Anyone you put on a pedestal, we are human.
Yeah,
you're bound to fail, but now you'll fall further because you put me all the way up there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not working. It has never worked.
True.
Okay.
I also think because we have a huge difference now from then. Yes, we're coming from a space where we are taught about violence as being sort of the norm in our societies, in the communities, which then explains some of the narratives we see. When we've had cases of women being killed, it's blamed on the victim.
Yeah.
And you sort of start to understand that it's because of how we are mentally, where we're coming from our teachings from young, that, of course, you don't hold the killer or the man accountable because he just did what is normal, the violence.
Yes.
You blame the girl for being there or for putting herself in that situation or for, now it's about money these days, for taking his money, for eating the pizza that he bought for you. I mean, it's actually gotten to a point where I'm like, but I think a big thing that we see, a big change that has happened, and it's sort of making the violence become more prominent, is the fact that we have over the years also had a lot of women empowerment. So now women are not just being married off at 16, 14, they're going to school, they're getting jobs, they have their own money, but I'm supposed to still submit to said violent partner. Of course, now there's pushback.
Yeah.
Now women are speaking up and saying absolutely not.
Yeah.
So if you're not correcting the baseline, but you're changing the arm of the victim, of course we're going to see.
Definitely.
Because then I feel like it also pushes... So red pill content. We were talking behind the scenes and I mentioned for this episode I was doing a little bit of research because I'm very careful with what I consume online just because of how the space has become. But so that I could understand what I was going to talk about, I started to look up misogynistic content online, red pill content. What are they called? Incels. That's sort of territory. I didn't survive 15 minutes. I was triggered in so many ways. Yeah. But it seems like there's a lot of men who still believe or now have actually dug down even more because they feel like they're fighting against women being empowered as a direct threat to them as men.
Yeah.
What's your opinion about that side of things? Because I feel like those ones now, it's an extreme, yes, but it is becoming more commonplace.
Of course, they are fighting something. Superficially, they think women are their enemies. They think women are the reason the world is the way it is for the man. But they don't know it's actually more powerful men who've created this disorder for them because of what patriarchy is. Patriarchy is a double-edged sword. Okay. On one side, it harms women, but it starts by harming men first. You see?
True.
Because for you to continue being a foot soldier for this thing, we have to train you to be in a certain way. Yeah. For you to continue doing it,
for you to serve me, to continue becoming the powerful human I am, I need you to act a certain role for me. Yeah.
But deeper, it's also the fight for resources. Okay. And this is where we have to interconnect it with capitalism. Okay. Where we are now talking about, these guys complaining about pizza and spending on the women. The women only love them when they have money and something to spend, and when they don't have, they don't feel seen. Okay. The way the world of capital is set up, poor men were initially the laborers, and it was set up in such a way that this labor, you're being paid very little money so that you can attempt to take care of your woman and your children.
True.
Okay. It is incredibly unsustainable because of the heavy burden it has on your body, okay, and on your spirit, because at the workplace, there is no space to be a human being.
True.
Okay.
True.
Now, everybody had to learn to survive in this kind of situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Down here at home, we didn't have that kind of thing. Labor was also divided. We did a lot of things communally. And then all of a sudden, somebody is telling you, this house you're living in, which you even built, you have to pay tax.
You have to pay tax on it, yeah.
it doesn't make sense.
True.
Now ile shamba yenye ilikuwa yako, now you're laboring,
but everything you pick from it, you give us.
Yeah. And then we give you some small coins as appreciation.
True.
You know, all that is abuse. Okay. Now, what we don't know is that men are grieving from something they don't understand.
Right.
They're grieving from the pressure. They're grieving from a misunderstanding of the impetus of this situation. So it is easy to blame the women because that's what's easy. It's here. It's right here.
Yeah.
We don't have the consciousness to go back in time and the emotional bandwidth to sit with these emotions and want to understand, where is this really coming from? The easy thing to do is to take it out, to take the frustration out on the person who I perceive to be weak in my head.
Yeah.
So that's women and children.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where all of these crazy things are coming from. Okay. Now, the fact that we've had women also being empowered, and I think one thing we fail to realize is we didn't just wake up and women were empowered. Women have had to die for this empowerment to start.
That's true.
We don't talk about that part. Like, women have been working tirelessly over the years to make sure that, reproductive health policy, gender policies, voting, all this stuff, education, women have been men didn't just wake up one day, sasa ni wakati wanawake waweze kwenda shule. Didn't happen.
Never, because it's not to your advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we are really being honest about these conversations, it's not us who said, oh, now let's take women to school, girls to school, now let's reduce, consent of age, marriageable, whatever. Nah, like, women have really just been pushing back from the longest time.
For the longest time, true.
We don't have education about that. So we now think it's just spoiled women waking up, being feminists and making noise online. But there's a long streak of lives that have been lost. Sometimes men's allies' lives as well that have been lost in just us as a society trying to humanize women, And we always have to go beyond because as at now, it looks as if it's only man-woman thing.
True.
But we have queer people and children in this same violence. Okay?
True.
All of which that is being instigated by patriarchy here at the top. All right?
Yeah.
So, again, resources. That's where a lot of the thing is, because these guys are angry that they are working so hard, they're not getting enough money, and the woman can only love them if they have these money. Resources. You get. So it's really a matter of resources.
Yeah.
If they had a lot of these resources, this pressure maybe would not have been there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a man, I think it takes a lot of self-love to sit yourself down and ask yourself, the way I think of a woman really reflects back to the way I think of myself. The way I think of queer people, the way I think of any group of humans whom I think are lesser or have been socialized or conditioned to be lesser really reflects on who I am. One of my favorite writers called Toni Morrison, she was speaking this in relation to race, but it applies to all groupings really. And she said, if you only have to feel strong when somebody else is on their knees, then you have a serious problem.
The problem is you. Ain't that the truth? Problem is you.
You do have a serious problem. Yeah. If I'm only strong when somebody's submitting to me, what the hell?
Yeah.
What really?
Because are you then actually strong?
Really?
Yeah.
And that's where the phrase fragile masculinity comes from. Because Claire, if we are dating, I have no business trying to control who you hang out with, what you drink or don't drink,
how I dress,
how
I
you
wear
dress,
my hair,
how you speak,
what time I get home.
You're
supposed to. You're an extension of me.
The hell, you're not a child. You're not a child. Gee, this rib nonsense things, man.
Yeah.
Surely. Surely. We are stooping that low.
Tutakasirisha watu leo.
It doesn't make sense to me.
But it's honestly, these are the conversations that we're refusing to have. But realistically, if you've taught men that they can only be strong if women submit
and children,
to them.
Yes.
And children. And on any other, like you said, marginalized groups.
Yes.
First of all, it's the reason we have marginalized groups. It's the reason we have groups that are seen as lesser than, because someone sat somewhere historically and told us, like you said, men are the supreme being.
Yeah.
And so everyone else, depending on how far you fall, because again, we fall further and further, then you have to figure out how you work your way through that. I think one of the biggest ways to combat it tends to be education. And just the baseline of me trying to have people talk about sexual health, about reproductive health from a young age has so much pushback because, again, it's so foreign from the narratives that we've already grown up in. And from just taking a bit from your story, a lot of the challenges you had to overcome came from lack of information, from a lack of someone telling you this is normal, this is not normal, this is okay, this is not okay. If something happens to you, this is who you come to. Come to me, let's talk about it. You didn't have that at all. And the fact that we continue to allow our children not to have safe spaces, conversations around their bodies, around consent, around like if it's a boy, talking about reproductive health of girls as well, because again, how does this work? If I only know mine and then you only know yours.
Then
what are we expecting? So I do believe, like what you're talking about, we're just not having conversations and it's propagating an evil to become worse. It's not that femicide is new. That's the other thing.
True.
We may be talking about it a lot now because we are seeing or we are spotlighting cases, but it's not that it's unique. It's not that last year at this time there weren't as many deaths. It's just that, yes, we are now talking about it. What I don't know, or maybe what I would want to hear from you is you came round from a space of violence to actually, let me tell you, yours. Yours is an overcoming of the extreme because, again, your pushback is a pushback. Sometimes even me, I'll watch your videos and I'm like, Rix, nini. You woke up, hey, bada, chill. We're only just dipping our toes, chill.
I know.
But how did you navigate coming from a space where violence was the norm to being sex positive, to being positive and pushing back against, like you said, fragile masculinity, toxic masculinity, and actually embracing, encouraging for women to have a safe space and to be empowered and stand up and be able to speak for themselves. How did you navigate that journey? Because now I'm curious.
Man, I've been through the trenches. It's not been as sexy as it looks right now. You know, in the beginning, I didn't have a language for what I was feeling. I was disenfranchised in our home. My body was vandalized, like I was some piece of property. My voice was stifled, and I hated it, Claire. Oh, every single minute of it. That anything I felt did not have space to express. I hated it. And I think there's a part of me that is also lucky that my maternal side of the family, we had a grandpa who was the complete opposite of this other side.
Right.
On my mom's side of the family, they were really happy people. So I have memories of whenever I'd visit them, I can remember hearing them laugh throughout the night. They were just telling stories with each other, and people would wake up in the morning and have breakfast, and they were just joyous faces, you know? So my body would register that as safety, you know? And I would gravitate more towards these people who are joyful, they were peaceful, there was no fighting, you know? So for me, the beginning of imagining a man being gentle started with my maternal grandma. That man, even if he was angry, he never rose his voice. He was always chill, you see. So I knew in my heart that I didn't have to be the way my society was telling me, the way my dad wanted me to be, and other quarters of my culture. I knew I didn't have to be that because grandpa was really a really gentle person.
Yeah.
But even deeper was the fact that I didn't like how violence felt to me. I didn't feel that was something I wanted to identify with. Not to say I completely escaped it, because if I'm being honest, and this is why for me these stories are important to say, in my first years of dating, I wasn't always kind. I remember coming off as quite nonchalant in some instances. There were partners I should have treated better, right?
Yeah.
Communicated better. I should have been more honest in certain situations. I wanted to be nice, overly nice, because I wanted to be loved so bad, I wasn't honest again in some times, and so in as much as maybe physically I was never violent with one another, any person. Sometimes emotionally I was. Yeah. Sometimes I'd also be manipulative. Right. I do remember those first years in my 20s, somewhere there. And some of those things took time to shake off. So they went as they reduced, as I continued asking, probing.
Proactively unlearn.
Yes. Yeah. So even today, Claire, there are people, when I look back, there are people who don't have good memories of me.
Right.
And the part about forgiving myself is one of the hardest jobs I've ever had to do. Because I'm like, oh my gosh, this person probably feels I'm a devil. I didn't do this thing right here and then there, and I know even today, because I'm a bit visible, they see me and wonder.
They wonder, is this the same guy?
Why weren't you like this?
Or maybe they don't believe that you're different. Because that's also
some people
possible.
Also don't. Yeah, and I totally would understand that.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember there was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, somebody I'd tried to have a thing with wrote me a message on Instagram, and she said, she's told a lot about the work I do around mental health and these gender conversations, because, Twitter, people throw stones at me a lot. And that's not the memory she has of me,
Right, yeah.
Now, I had even forgotten what could have happened between us. But then the responsible thing to do in that moment was to say, first of all, I'm sorry for this thing that I must have done to pain you this much. I am willing to offer space that we talk about it in a way that will make you feel that there was a person I was that I didn't even know. And I'm willing to offer space for you to, expel this pain and anger in a conversation, and this person was emotionally not ready to have that talk.
Yeah.
But then that's something I have to live with.
Yeah.
That when I go back, all this trauma and not knowing myself and being angry, I was also angry, made me hurt people, right? And because I had told myself, I don't like this violence and how it feels, I had to work so hard not to imprint it on other people. You get?
Yeah.
So Rix didn't just appear. I'm not, and even today, I'm not like a saint of some sort, What I try to make men understand is, first of all, the form of masculinity that has been sold to us, we cannot be human beings in that form, because it means we are okay with hurting people and not having consequences about it. What I am advocating for is that you humanize yourself, right? Yes, we will, because of how messed up the world is. The other thing is, women are also human beings. They steal, they kill,
True.
They eat fair.
True.
They do all sorts of things.
True.
They are human beings.
Yeah.
And patriarchy does not want you to see that women are human beings. We sort of also pedestalize them in the way that, you be like my mother, who took up suffering and was also still caring and loving.
She gave everything
all the time.
All the time, regardless.
And I tell people, in fact, Mary, at home, not even one day, for example, and this is just one example, did I ever know that my mother was menstruating?
Right.
Not even a single day. Right. In fact, it's just my curiosities.
That's fascinating.
Yes, that one day I just stumbled upon these always pads.
Yeah.
And the only reason I understood was because we had these adverts on TV that these girls were dancing happily.
Yeah, the ink ones. We keep pouring ink on a pad and you're like, okay.
And that's the only way I connected.
Yeah.
But not one day did I know, okay, mom is going through her menstruation. Maybe this is how we will support her in the house.
But what was that?
Nothing.
Though? What is that? Support her?
It's not even a conversation. Don't even
it doesn't
think
cross
about
your mind.
You get?
Yeah.
So there are many things that we are very removed from a woman's experiences, especially with her body and her general experience as a woman. And I tell guys all the time, you might think that it is enough to say you protect your woman because you are born to be a protector. But the moment that woman leaves that door, you don't have power.
True.
Another dude will harm her. You won't do any shit about it. Some other guy will grope her. You won't have anything to do. You can't do anything if somebody violates her. So your protection, quote unquote, is an illusion.
True.
It really is an illusion.
True. And I think that's why I have such a difficult time with the statement of not all men.
Yeah.
That statement asks me beyond, because sure, you're not violent, but what are you doing to support? Change the men around you.
Yes.
Are you speaking up when they tell you the stories of their violence? When you watch them be violent to someone? When you watch them, forget even physical violence, because that's where we focus and say, you know what, if he didn't hit you, it should be fine. There's emotional. And we know that there's emotional and psychological violence, not just even abuse. And we don't talk about it. And because I say me, like you said, I protect the women in my life. My sisters, my mom, my wife, my kids, my daughters, they're fine. Are they really though?
It's an illusion. It's an illusion.
Because outside of you, outside of the space that you feel you're curated for them, are they safe?
Really?
They're tough questions.
Those are very hard questions. And you see, for most of us, we project because we don't want to go deep inside. It's a lot of work, and most times we don't even have the tools to do that because of this idea that a masculine person is overly extroverted. You're just about dominance and the outside world and everything. We do the same with emotions. We just think it's about the outside world, the politics, the whatevers, the sports, the whatevers, But when you haven't sorted out what's going on inside you here, you're actually really a dead tree.
True.
You look like you're alive, but you're really dead inside.
True.
You see. And so the advocacy really is around, there's going to be pain starting to do this emotional work. And it is scary as hell to face yourself. It is scary as hell to look at yourself in the mirror as a dude and say, okay, where do I start? Because we don't know.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fear that many of us are living with, that if we abandon this masculinity thing the way we've known it, what else is there? What else is there to live by?
What does life look like?
Yeah, because somebody asked me on Twitter the other day, so now, after we remove patriarchy, so now... you see, so now what will life be like? And you see, I understand the question is because they've not imagined any other life, because this is the only life they've known. So they fear letting go of it. It's scary because now so now women watatukalia.
Tukaliwe
sasa. Sasa even mnataka. You see,
because that's the pushback. That
exactly.
We are taking over. The women, we're letting them take over. And we're like, no, that's not what you're saying. There's a middle ground, guys.
And the other reality we have to face is the fact that women are human beings, all right? There are some of them who even with more women's rights, who will still be violent towards other women. Kwanza, women against women is crazy. We don't even talk about it.
I feel like that's another conversation that we'll need to have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Women on men and women on children, which is another whole thing that's been going on between mothers and their kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a good chunk of women are usually really willing to share space. Really. From my experience, everywhere I've gone, women are often really quite ready to share space. They're not into this power struggles, dynamics things. And there's also been talk about the way I actually wanted to come say this on some podcast, and I'm glad I'm here. This thing about a woman is so much in her masculine energy and CG now.
Yeah.
And with the way we also shame men who we perceive to be in CG acting like in their feminine, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a lot of bullshit. When we say women are acting in their masculine a lot, like it's too much. And this conversation is a lot more in Black American spaces. We identify masculine with hardness.
Yep. With aggression.
With aggression.
Loudness.
Yes.
Yeah. You take up space.
Yes.
You fight back.
Exactly.
You're literally violent. You're prickly.
That's violence. All
that's
of it.
the masculinity,
right?
we're identifying.
We identify that being in the masculine energy as being that's masculinity. But it's not. It's a trauma response. That's a trauma response. And anybody who's acting out of trauma will be like that.
True.
So because men have been acting like that for such a long time, we actually now believe that's their nature.
Yeah.
It isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't. If you've had to be hardened for such a long time without expressing your emotions, the obvious outcome of your behavior will be aggression.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with your masculinity.
True.
It is just what life has been done to you. That's what we need to be focusing on. The grief of the boy that was stolen away from me because I was told wanaume hawali. Because I was told you have to be the head of the home. What if I don't want to be the head of the home? What the hell? Maybe I actually want my woman to be the head of the house. So I don't deserve
maybe
to be a man.
You're the more submissive one.
Exactly. Maybe I actually am the more submissive one. Maybe I'm even better with the kids more than she is. But we can't imagine that as being a reality in our lives. And yet, in many, many, many homes, Claire, the women are the ones who are actually managing the houses,
True.
paying the bills. Jamaa kwa hapo tu ameng'edhia.
But you see, we say it as a negative.
Yes, ndio.
We don't
Tunaona hiyo sasa ni kama
sasa hapo
you get.
Hata wewe pia umekuwa extreme. Nataka
why...
tuwale na watoto.
Uko tu hapo.
It's just there.
And that's the thing. We have to recalibrate how we approach partnership. You get. But before thinking of partnership, it has to be about how we see one another. Yes, you are a woman, but then the thing that has life inside you is a spirit. It's not a woman, it's not man, it's not anything. It's just a spirit. And that's how even Africans and all indigenous communities were. Even our consciousness of God, it was spirit. So we had feminine gods and masculine gods. God of fertility, God of sex, God of whatever, sun, whatever. They took different genders. And that's what we knew. We knew people are good at different things, not just one identity of a people being good at everything. It's impossible. It's dehumanizing.
True.
All right?
True.
So may we continue pushing these boundaries. I know the price I've had to pay to be who I am today. And every man who is willing or wants to have some kind of peace of mind, you have to be willing to pay that price.
This world, do the work.
This world is so unforgiving to you in many ways. You've been sad about many things, okay? But until you stop pointing these fingers at people, it's the same thing. If I was angry about my dad for a very long time, I am still angry at him for a lot of things, all right? But at some point I realized this bitterness is eating me up. It's not eating him. It's eating me up.
True.
I'm not showing up in my relationships. My work is suffering. I am angry a lot of time, irritable a lot of time because of him. So I centralized him in his life, in my life, and my life is just there waiting for me to live it. So I could be angry of patriarchy. I could still be angry at my dad, but then I have space for myself to give space for me to express myself, dance the way I want to dance, enjoy my life with people around me, create the reality I want to live by. And I knew deep inside my heart, I have no business trying to dominate anybody. Because the funny thing also, there are also women who, with the internalized misogyny, who also want men to be that thing,
True.
And you're like, oh, a man has to be this, and a man has to be that, and a man has to be this. And I'm like, sis, please.
We're not for each other.
I've done enough of that stuff. And watafute huko nje tafadhali, I am about, let us co-create life together. All right. Let us see, okay, so this is where you are today, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually, whatever all these facets are. How can we merge our lives in a way that we can enjoy life here, including how to maneuver conflict, which is something else we also don't talk about when we are really happy in these relationships. Beyond all that stuff, can we just humanize one another?
True.
I was telling a guy I met at some AI conference last week. He was asking me what I do, and I told him, I want you to imagine, for example, us dudes, never in our lives do we have to think about putting a budget for pads in our lives. That's something that never
doesn't even cross your mind.
Ati niko na budget ya pads after every month ipi iko kwa. Unless it's for my daughter maybe or something, but it's not me I'm using it. So it's not a cost that I incur out of me being a man, out of the experiences of my body. Women incur so many costs just to stay alive. Just to stay,
just to maneuver,
mi naweza kaa niishi na taweli moja sijui
kasabuni
kapanga kangu kako hapo, naoga nayo, naosha vyombo nayo, nafanya kila kitu, naosha nguo nayo. A woman's life is a little colorful, it's a little diverse, and we don't have to fight that.
True.
We can just collaborate with it. And that means the more we offer them space to work, to have security, to be happier, to be healthier, it means even me, I have higher chances of being happier.
True.
It really is.
So very true.
It's like that.
Yeah.
And because me as Rix, I know I want to be happier. I want to be healthier. I want everybody else around me to feel the same.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? It means keeping pads in my home because I have women who visit there. Whether they are one-time visitors, whether it's my sister, whoever they are.
Yeah.
I try to create space in a way because women do these things for us.
True.
We go to their homes and everything is just bliss. Like you're just there to utaki kutoka.
You're so comfortable. Everything smells nice. Fresh
and I'm
food.
Like, even me,
and I come home to this sisal mattress.
Exactly.
And she has to put up with this panga in the bathroom, which is very odd.
So I encourage men. Nice things, you don't always just have to meet them in women's homes.
True.
Even you can enjoy them.
Yeah.
You can have these skin routines if you want. Wacha kuparara kila siku hapa Nairobi.
Are we listening?
You don't have to look like your problems.
True. That's so true. Yeah.
But then again, let us also invest in male friendships. You see, very important tenet.
Yeah.
Investing in male friends have helped me go through the worst things in my life. And all my life, I've always had really great male friends around me. Okay. And I share, because my boys come home all the time, and I'm always sharing these things on my Instagram stories, and people really keep telling me, oh, you're lucky. We don't have this, we don't have that.
Yeah.
Community is what will save our asses.
True.
Like
True.
There's no other way out.
Yeah.
I will self-care myself to death. But it will only take me up to a certain point,
level.
you know?
Because again, you learn from each other. You learn from
Yes.
other people's experiences. It's
Yeah.
better to learn that way than to learn everything the hard way. Yeah.
Like when you're going through a heartbreak,
Yeah.
there's only so much you can do for you by your own.
True.
You know?
True. Yeah.
I talk to those boys like, yo man, hey mazoe dem ameniweza. You know, kuna kitu ili happen hapa jo, si feel poa.
Yeah.
And they come home and we play FIFA or we cook or we
Yeah.
do something and they just spend time with me. And we do the same for each other.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
Si kila saa tio mnakunywa tu. Alafu watu wanaenda home.
Yeah.
Haujaongea.
But that's such an important point because like you've mentioned several times, again, we don't have the male role models that we should have had from the beginning, but then can we create them amongst our circles now? Because I feel like men also were shut down. You're shut down very early. You're not supposed to communicate your feelings. You're not supposed to show emotion.
Yeah.
Except, of course, rage. But don't show emotion.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to... You don't really have circles where it's safe to have a conversation without being made to feel like now that you're being effeminate. Now you're being, hey, umekuwa mama, una complain, unalia macho. Wacha umama. So we need to change those narratives. And the only way I feel like we can is by your example, start within your own community. Change the narrative with you and your boys.
Yes.
Because again, it's very difficult for men to listen to women. So me coming in to tell you this is how you should.
But it's also funny, Claire, you mentioned that because it's funny you mentioned that because in my life, women have taught me more to be a man than men have.
But I think also it's because you're receptive as opposed to the standard.
Maybe.
Because
that could be it.
It's very difficult to have that conversation. You're shut out just because you're a woman. Like, what would you know about boys?
Yeah.
Single mothers suffer this narrative all the time. What do you know about raising men?
Yeah.
And what business do you have? Like, you need to get the men in your life. But sometimes the men in her life are as toxic as they come.
Yeah.
So what choice does she have?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a conversation we could have forever. I think it raises more questions than it does answers. But I think just having the conversations themselves, having, like in your space, having boys you can talk to, people you can open up to who are men going through similar situations, and you're able to work around, because a lot of our issues can be solved by communication. And even in the circles that you're in, you can start it. You don't necessarily, I know there are people who will say, but my boys are not like that.
Yeah.
But you can be the one to start.
Yeah.
Like, do it afraid.
I mean, even in my space, I'm the one who began being vocal about being allies to feminism. They didn't get it in the beginning. And they also asked me those very difficult questions, but I stuck it out. I was there every day. Like, guys, we have to think, because at the end of the day, Claire, you see, today, there is really high likelihood that if I want to marry or date a chick, right, for heterosexual men at least, there's high likelihood I'm going to meet somebody who's been sexually harassed, who's been abused in very many forms, okay? That is almost 100% certainty, okay? So I cannot separate myself from this conversation because, I will still want a mother to my kids. I want a functioning girlfriend, like we put it. I have to care about these things because the woman I potentially will marry is not some saint who came clean as hell from Uranus or Jupiter. They are living here and they are watching what we are doing, what we are saying on these social media platforms.
They're experiencing.
They're experiencing this
They're on the
violence.
receiving end of the violence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So not all men, I am part of that chaos. If I don't speak up, I am enabling that chaos. If I pretend, mi sijai piga mwanamke, I am contributing because I'm saying there are other men who are doing it.
And
it's just
okay.
that, I'm just not one of them. You get that is very white supremacist thinking. It's also very colonial thinking because it's about divide and rule. All right. The moment we think of separatedness in how we build community, we've already failed.
True.
All right.
True.
So could these misconceptions about who good men and bad men are end? Because if I'm a dude and I'm saying I even want to see women better, I have to care about the things that affect women. It ends there.
That simple.
It's basic.
True.
You get.
True.
If I care about men being better, I have to care about the things that men are going through. I have to care about them. For the longest time in our homes, it's our mothers and the women in our lives who've cared about men and nursing them back to life. What are we doing? When it's our turn, we abandon the women.
True.
Right there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I know it's a difficult conversation. There probably is going to be a lot of hate even after this.
Yep.
But it's
True.
the only way through. We have to go through this mud. And for men who are honest about having healthy families, let us start talking to one another.
True.
Yeah.
True. I think I could talk to you all day. And then this episode will be 5 hours long.
I know.
So instead, I'll have you back for another one.
I'll
And we'll
back.
continue the conversation. But for now, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. For those who've survived this long, because this is going to be a long one, thank you for listening in, watching. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the comments, to reading your DMs, because I'm going to hope that there's not going to be that much hate. You and me know different, because, you know, the way people are online, I don't know. But I'm hoping that by listening, you've understood where we're coming from and you've challenged yourself a little bit to do with your own role as a man in the community, as a woman in the community, in our society today, trying to ask yourself harder questions about what you can do better or what your role can be to change the narrative. You don't have to be an activist. You don't have to go on the street. But how are you living your day-to-day experience? How are the people around you experiencing life with you in it? And I'll leave those questions there and invite you to join me for the next episode next week. In the meantime, please reach out. Social media handles are in the description. You can always DM, because I know some of these things people want to remain a bit anonymous. And maybe one of these days I'll have Rix back to address the comments and the questions that are sent in. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.